I've got here the Festool Domino 500 set and the sustainer of assorted cutters and dominoes. The Festool Domino is a machine that quickly and accurately cuts mortises into your workpieces that you then use a supplied Festool Domino as the loose tenon. So you got your two workpieces that you want to put together. Say this is a frame, rail, and stile, and you want to butt these together. So this machine will quickly make mortises into these two pieces, then use a supplied loose tenon, put that in there, and now your pieces fit accurately together. So let's take a closer look at that joint. So here's a sample joint using the Domino. You got our stile and the rail, and in there is a floating tenon, or the Domino itself. So the machine creates these two mortises, and they're different cutter sizes for different thicknesses of loose tenons. So you cut those and then just slip in the floating tenon, and the whole thing butts together with a really strong floating tenon joint. So this machine creates a joint that is two mortises and a loose or floating tenon. So what is that? It's a very traditional joint that's been used for ages. Typically, you might be familiar with a mortise and tenon, where this rail would have a tenon, integral tenon, and that would go into a mortise. Well, a loose tenon just means you make a mortise in both pieces, and then you've got a third piece, which is your tenon, floating or loose tenon, which fits into the two mortises to hold this joint together. Again, it's a traditional joint that's been used for hundreds of years, just like a mortise and tenon. In this machine, the Domino is now a way to make that joint extremely quickly and accurately. So let's take a closer look at the machine itself. The Domino looks and acts very much like a biscuit joiner, except that it's making these loose mortises instead of a biscuit joint. So you've got the main body with the motor and some controls, and essentially the cutter head comes out here in the front and it's oscillating when this is on. So you butt your workpiece where you want it, and then slide this in. It's going to create that mortise. Slide it back out, and then you'd have your mortise right there. The power supply is here at the back, which is the typical plug-it cord system that comes with the Festool power tools. And the dust collection is here on the side, which uses a 27mm hose and has that nice friction fit right there for dust collection. The Domino can make different size mortises for different thicknesses and lengths of tenons. If you buy the assortment that comes in a sustainer here, it comes with a variety of the different size tenons and the different cutters. These cutters go as small as a 4mm and up to a 10mm. And the length of the tenon is relative to that. The smaller ones, of course, aren't as deep, and the 10mm goes all the way up to 50mm in length. Changing that cutter size is a really easy process. You want to pop off the front here, use the wrench and just pop this off, which takes the front off from the rest of the body, and here's the cutter head. Then you use a supplied wrench to unlock the cutter. There's a spindle lock button here on the back, so you press and hold that, and then go ahead and use the wrench, unlock this front cutter, and spin it off. Got a bunch of threads here, so you just unthread it all the way. Take that off and get your new cutter size. This is the next size up. Make sure you thread it on the threads correctly. Put it all the way on, and then just use the wrench to snug it up. After you've changed the cutter head, you simply slide the front back onto the motor body and slide it in, and you'll hear it click in, and you're ready to go. To set the cutting depth, or how far in that cutter is going to go, how deep that mortise is going to be, you simply use this mechanism right here. That's easily marked. Flip this up, move the green button, and flip it back, and now the cutter will come out shorter depth. Or if I flip it down towards the bottom, now it's all the way at the bottom, it comes out much, much further. So these are sized for the different tenons. So for instance, the number 8 8mm height comes in both a 40 and a 50. You can see the difference here, 40 and 50 millimeter depth. So for a 40 millimeter depth, I want to set that at 20 millimeters for each mortise. And that's clearly marked, get that up there. That's clearly marked here at the 20. So you just set that to 20 depth. And if you want the 50, then you go down to the 25 so that each mortise will be 25 millimeters in depth. You typically want your mortise centered on your workpiece for the greatest strength. So you want to be able to set the height of that mortise down so that it's centered here in the workpiece. Then of course you want your pieces to line up. Maybe you want them flush or maybe just a little bit offset. And you do that with the height adjustment here on the domino. The height is set with this front fence here. So this raises and lowers, which controls how far that cutter head is going to be from the edge of your stock. So there's a locking lever here, unlock it, you can raise and lower that, and then lock it back down. There's also a handy guide right here that shows you in millimeters the depth of your fence. Since you do want to typically center that mortise on your workpiece, Festool's also included a handy depth gauge or depth stop for the thickness of your workpiece. So here you can see it's set to 25 millimeters, which is about 1 inch. And then you can go ahead, unlock, and lower the fence to that depth setting. And you can just make out here on the left that it has centered the bit on about 12 millimeters. So it's going to be centered on that workpiece. Typically, you'll probably be coming straight on to pieces or putting a mortise straight in. So you'd use the fence in this setting, or you'd use the fence all the way up in this setting. But of course, you can go to any angle, which is helpful for doing miters, joining miters at different angles. So there's a couple of set stops here, but of course you can go any angle from 0 all the way through to 90. And that simply locks down with this lever right here to lock it in place. Now the domino is set to cut a perfectly sized mortise for the settings that you set it on, that you put it on. So you've got your depth setting here and your height setting, and it's going to oscillate that cutter and create a perfectly sized hole for that tenon. But if you want to go a little bit oversized in width, you can use this dial here on top. And that can be very useful when you want to use a lot of these in a row for strength. And you want the first one to be the alignment. So one of them is a very tight fitting alignment, maybe at one end. And then the rest of them are for strength, and you don't need them to be that tight for alignment. You can go ahead and loosen up the width of the mortise by a little bit, or even a little bit more, to give you some wiggle room so that one of them is the alignment pin, and then the rest will fit no problem. The domino set comes with a couple of handy accessories. One is this trim stop, and this is really useful for narrow pieces. So if I want to cut a mortise in this very narrow rail, it's going to be pretty tricky to get in there. So this just simply slides onto the front here and then locks in with these two locking levers. Slide them in, lock it down. And then turn it over, and you can see here there's adjustments for the size of this small piece. So you can put the piece in, and you've got your center line here marked on the bottom of this plate. And you can align that. You simply unlock these two large green knobs. You can slide this in, and then slide it left and right, get it just where you want it to be. And then go ahead and lock those down. And now your piece is held very securely for operation. So then you can now turn it over, slide your pieces in, do your mortise, slide the piece out, do the next piece, and you've got it all set up for those small pieces. The other accessory is this cross stop, and this is useful for quickly milling a bunch of mortises at an equal spacing without having to measure. And that slips right into this little dovetail here. Slide it in, and then there's a lock here. This little lever here, simply lock that in, and now you can set where you want them, how far apart you want them to be using this stop. So you do one, do your first one, say this one here, and then you come along and that little pin is going to register against that mortise, and you can do your next one and then slide over, register, next one, and make a series of them all the way along. Being Festool, of course, everything fits really well here in the sustainer. The trim stop, the various cutter sizes, the cross stop pieces there, plug-it cord, domino itself, support block, and the wrench over there. The container of assorted dominoes is super handy for working with various thicknesses of stock. Comes with everything from the 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 millimeter variety of tenons. The Festool domino is an extremely fast and accurate way to make mortises with a floating tenon, which is an extremely strong traditional furniture joint. You simply butt your pieces together and mark where you want that tenon, zip zip with the domino to create the mortises, glue the tenon, and slip it in. It's as simple as that. So if you're doing work where you're butting pieces together, this system is a fast, accurate, and extremely strong way of joining those pieces of work.